The neon lights of New Aurora City painted shadows across Lyra Nathros's face as she hurried through the crowded streets of Level 42. Her synthetic lab coat, embedded with false credentials, felt heavy on her shoulders. 6 months of careful planning had led to this moment, and she couldn't afford any mistakes. The genetic research facility loomed ahead, its crystalline spires reaching toward the perpetually smog-filled sky. Security drones hummed overhead, their red scanning beams sweeping the streets in predictable patterns. Lyra checked her wrist display, 3 minutes until the next shift change. "Dr. Reynolds, your access card, please," the security guard said as she approached the entrance. Lyra smiled, presenting the forged credentials she'd spent weeks perfecting. The guard's cybernetic eye whirred, processing the data. In the distance, an explosion rocked the lower levels of the city. "Right on schedule." The guard turned, distracted by the commotion. Lyra slipped inside, her heart pounding against her ribcage. The resistance had promised a diversion, but she hadn't expected something quite so dramatic. The sterile corridors of the facility were eerily quiet. Most of the staff had already left for the day, leaving only the night shift researchers and security systems. Lyra navigated the maze-like passages, following the memorized path to Laboratory 7. She rounded a corner and froze. A man in a black tactical suit stood before the laboratory door, his back to her. Not security, his stance and equipment spoke of military training. The Resistance had promised this would be a solo mission. "You're late," he said without turning around. Lyra's hand moved to the concealed pulse weapon at her hip. "Who are you?" He turned, revealing a face marked by a thin scar running from his left temple to jaw. "Darien Vale. I'm your extraction team." "I work alone," Lyra said, keeping her distance. The Resistance agreed. "Plans change." Darien's voice was quiet but carried an edge of authority. "Syndicate forces are moving into the sector. We have 18 minutes before they lock down the entire district." Lyra studied him, noting the subtle signs of combat enhancement, the slight glow behind his eyes, the too precise movements. "Former military. Former lots of things." He gestured to the door. "Shall we?" The laboratory's security panel yielded to Lyra's hacked credentials. Inside, holographic displays flickered to life, illuminating rows of containment units. Each held samples of genetic material, the building blocks of Project Nexus. "Which one?" Darien asked, moving to the first row. Lyra accessed the central console, her fingers dancing across the holographic interface. "Section C, Unit 17. It contains the original strain." She felt Darien's eyes on her as she worked. "You know a lot about this project for someone who's supposed to be a simple infiltrator." "Knowledge is survival," Lyra replied, carefully avoiding his gaze. The console chimed, and a small cylindrical container rose from the storage bank. Inside, a pale blue liquid swirled with threads of silver, the key to everything. An alarm blared, bathing the laboratory in red light. "We've got company," Darien said, drawing his weapon. "Time to go." Lyra secured the container in her carry case. "The northeast emergency exit is already compromised." Darien pressed a small device against the wall. "We're taking a more direct route." The wall exploded outward, revealing a maintenance shaft. The wind howled through the opening, carrying the acrid smell of the city's lower levels. "Ladies first," Darien said with a hint of a smile. Lyra shook her head. "You're insane." "Probably." He grabbed her hand. "But we're both dead if we stay here." They jumped together as security forces burst into the laboratory. Lyra's heart leaped into her throat as they plummeted through layers of city infrastructure. Darien's grappling line caught a maintenance beam, swinging them through a service tunnel. They landed hard on a maintenance platform 40 levels below. Lyra clutched the case to her chest, checking for damage. The sample was secure. "That wasn't so bad, was it?" Darien asked, helping her up. Speak for yourself. Lyra brushed off her coat, now torn and stained. I didn't ask for a partner. No, but you got one anyway. He tapped his comm unit. Transport's waiting 3 levels down. Think you can manage another jump? Before she could answer, gunfire erupted from above. Security drones descended, their weapons tracking. Run now, argue later. Darian suggested. Lyra looked at him, seeing past the scarred exterior to something familiar, someone else carrying secrets, fighting against a system too powerful to challenge alone. Fine, she said, but we're having a long talk about communication protocols after this. They ran together through the shadows of New Aurora City, the stolen future clutched in Lyra's hands, and the past nipping at their heels. Neither knew then how their paths would intertwine, or how their choices would echo across the stars. The safe house tucked beneath the ruins of old Aurora was hardly luxurious, but it offered something more valuable than comfort, anonymity. Lyra sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by holographic data streams projected from the stolen sample. Each strand of genetic code told a story, one that made her blood run cold. You're not just a resistance fighter, Darian said from the doorway. He'd spent the last 3 days securing their location, but his eyes never stopped watching her, analyzing. Lyra's fingers paused over the projection. What gave me away? The way you read that data. He stepped into the room, the dim light catching the edges of his scar. You're not translating it, you're remembering. She closed the projection, plunging the room into shadows. There are things you don't want to know, Darian. Try me. He sat beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. I've seen enough secrets to know when one's worth keeping. Lyra studied his face, searching for any sign of deception. Instead, she found something unexpected, understanding. Project Nexus wasn't just about combining human and alien DNA, she said finally. It was about creating a bridge between what we are and what we could become. The alien genetic material they discovered, it's not dead. It's waiting. Waiting for what? The right catalyst. Lyra reopened the projection, highlighting a specific sequence. This code is dormant, but under the right conditions, it could rewrite human genetics on a massive scale. Evolution in moments instead of millennia. Darian leaned closer, his shoulder brushing hers. And you know this because? Because I helped design it. The words felt like ash in her mouth. Before I understood what they really wanted it for. The silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken questions. Finally, Darian spoke. The Syndicate doesn't just want to control this technology. They want to control the evolution of our entire species. Yes. Lyra stood, pacing the small room. But they don't understand the risks. The alien DNA responds to emotional resonance. Strong feelings can trigger unexpected mutations. If they try to force it. A distant explosion interrupted her, followed by the wail of security sirens. Darian was on his feet instantly, weapon drawn. They found us, he said, moving to the window. We need to move. Lyra quickly packed the sample and her equipment. There's a maintenance tunnel that leads to the old subway system. If we can. The wall exploded inward. Through the dust and debris, armored figures emerged, their tactical suits bearing the Syndicate's emblem. At their head stood a woman with chrome-plated cybernetics covering half her face, Director Raven. Hello, Lyra, Raven said, her augmented voice carrying artificial warmth. Did you really think we wouldn't find you? Darian moved in front of Lyra, his weapon trained on the Director. You're not taking her. Noble, but unnecessary. Raven smiled. We just want what she stole. The rest is, negotiable. It's not stolen if it was mine to begin with, Lyra said, her hand finding Darian's arm. The contact sent an unexpected surge through her, fear, determination, and something else, something warming. The sample in her bag pulsed with a faint blue light. Raven's cybernetic I word, focusing on the glow. Interesting. Your emotional state is affecting the sample. Just as our tests predicted. Tests. Darian's grip on his weapon tightened. Why do you think we let her escape? Raven stepped forward. We needed to confirm the emotional catalyst theory. And you, Mr. Vale, have played your part perfectly. Understanding dawned on Lyra like ice water in her veins. The resistance contact, the extraction plan, you orchestrated all of it. Not all of it. Darian's voice was low, meant only for her. They didn't plan for this. He fired at the ceiling, bringing down a cascade of debris between them and the syndicate forces. In the chaos, Lyra felt his hand grab hers, pulling her toward the back wall. The tunnel? He asked. She nodded, her heart racing. Third panel from the left. They crashed through the hidden entrance as gunfire erupted behind them. The tunnel was narrow and dark, their footsteps echoing off ancient concrete. Did you know? Lyra asked as they ran. About their plan? No. Darian's voice carried no deception. But I suspected something was wrong when they gave me your extraction assignment. I've been burned by them before. They emerged into the vast, empty space of the abandoned subway station. Rusted trains sat like sleeping giants in the darkness. Why help me then? Lyra stopped, needing to understand. If you suspected a trap. Darian turned to her, his expression softening in the dim emergency lights. Because sometimes the most important things find us when we're not looking for them. The sample pulsed again, brighter this time. Lyra felt something stir within her DNA, a response to emotions she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. We need to keep moving, Darian said, though he made no move to pull away. Yes, Lyra agreed, even as she stepped closer to him. But first. Their kiss was brief but electric, sending ripples of energy through the sample and through Lyra's very cells. When they parted, both knew something fundamental had changed. In the distance, syndicate forces were approaching. But for that moment, in the darkness beneath a dying city, two people who had spent their lives running found something worth standing still for. The abandoned research outpost on the outskirts of the wasteland had become their temporary sanctuary. 3 weeks had passed since their escape from the subway tunnels, and each day brought new discoveries, both about the genetic sample and each other. Lyra stood before a makeshift lab setup, her reflection fractured across multiple holographic screens. The genetic sample's glow had intensified since their escape, its crystalline structure changing in response to something. Someone. You should sleep, Darian said, entering the room with 2 steaming cups of synthetic coffee. The past weeks had softened something in him, the military precision remained, but there was warmth now in his movements. I can't. Lyra accepted the cup, their fingers brushing. The changes are accelerating. Look. She pulled up a visualization of her own DNA structure. Threads of silvery light wove through the familiar double helix, creating patterns that shouldn't have been possible. It's not just the sample responding anymore, she said quietly. It's me. The original project. I didn't just help design it. I was part of it. Darian set his cup down, moving closer to study the display. You're a hybrid. The first successful one. Lyra's hands trembled slightly. They told me the treatments were to protect against radiation exposure. By the time I realized what they'd done, the changes were irreversible. That's why you ran. It wasn't a question. Yes. But also because I saw what they planned to do with the research. She switched the display to another file. They want to create an army of enhanced humans, completely under their control. The emotional resonance factor isn't a bug, it's a feature. They can use it to enforce loyalty, to literally program love and hate into their soldiers' DNA. Darian's expression darkened. Like they tried to do with me. Lyra turned to him. What do you mean? My enhancement surgery, when I was still with the military. He touched the scar on his face. They said it was standard combat augmentation, but I always felt different afterward. More controlled. Until I met you. The implications hit Lyra like a physical blow. You're carrying an earlier version of the genetic modifications. That's why. She trailed off, remembering their kiss in the subway, the way the sample had reacted. Why what? Before she could answer, the outpost's perimeter alarms screamed to life. Multiple screens flashed red, showing approaching vehicles through the wasteland dust. Syndicate forces, Darian said, already moving to gather their essential gear. At least 3 squads. Lyra quickly began the data deletion sequence, but her eyes caught something in the genetic analysis. Wait. Darian, look at this. The display showed their combined genetic patterns, his modified DNA interacting with her hybrid structure. Where the patterns overlapped, new sequences were forming, stable, powerful, and completely unpredictable. We're changing each other, she whispered. Every moment we're together, every emotion. An explosion rocked the outpost's foundations. They had minutes, maybe less. Lyra. Darian took her hands, his touch sending ripples of blue light across her skin. Whatever's happening to us, we'll figure it out together. But right now. We need to run, she finished, but didn't move. Except. I'm tired of running. Understanding dawned in his eyes. You want to fight. More than that. Lyra pulled up one final display. I want to complete the transformation. What's happening between us, it's what the original project was meant to be. Not weapons, not controlled evolution, but true symbiosis. A bridge between what we are and what we could become. Another explosion, closer this time. Through the dust, they could hear the mechanical whir of combat drones. It's dangerous, Darian said, though his pulse quickened at the idea. We don't know what will happen. No, Lyra agreed, stepping into his embrace. But I trust this. I trust us. Their kiss was different this time, deliberate, deep, charged with the power of choice. The sample in its container erupted with light, its energy flowing into them both. Lyra felt her DNA singing, reaching for his, their combined genetic code writing a new story in the language of life itself. Director Raven's voice echoed through the outpost's compromised communications system. You can't stop what's coming, Lyra. Evolution demands sacrifice. But Lyra barely heard her. She was lost in the transformation, in the feeling of Darian's arms around her as their bodies adapted, changed, became something new. Light poured from their joined hands, their synchronized hearts. When the syndicate forces breached the outpost's main door, they found something they hadn't expected. Something their carefully controlled experiments had never predicted. They found hope. Lyra and Darian stood together, their bodies glowing with internal light, their eyes shimmering with shared power. The genetic bridge between them had become a fortress, and a promise. You're right, Director, Lyra said, her voice carrying new harmonics. Evolution does demand sacrifice. Just not the kind you imagined. The battle that followed would change everything, not just for them, but for the future of human evolution itself. And as they fought, their combined power growing stronger with each passing moment, both knew there was no going back. They had become the dawn after humanity's longest night. News of what happened at the outpost spread through the underground networks like wildfire. Some called it a miracle, others an abomination. Security footage of Lyra and Darian's transformation had leaked, showing them decimating an entire syndicate strike force without firing a single shot. Their combined genetic power had simply evolved past the need for weapons. Now they sat in the cargo hold of a smuggler's ship, somewhere in the upper atmosphere. Lyra watched the silver light pulse beneath her skin in time with Darian's heartbeat across the room. Junction City just went dark, the ship's pilot, a woman named Reed, called from the cockpit. Syndicates shutting down whole sectors trying to find you too. Darian moved to the viewport, his enhanced vision piercing the clouds below. They're scared. They should be, Lyra said, studying the data tablet in her hands. The genetic changes are still spreading. Not just in us, but in everyone we've come in contact with. Read, your latest scan. The pilot laughed. Yeah, noticed I don't need my breathing meds anymore. Whatever you two are cooking up in your DNA is contagious, in a good way. It's correcting genetic flaws, Lyra explained. Natural evolution at an accelerated rate. But controlled by positive emotional resonance rather than random chance. Or syndicate programming, Darian added grimly. Which means we're a threat to their entire power structure, Lyra finished. They built their control on genetic manipulation. We represent true genetic freedom. The ship's proximity alerts suddenly screamed. Reed's voice turned urgent. Multiple vessels approaching. Military grade. They're charging weapons. The first blast rocked their ship before Darian could reach the weapons console. Reed wrestled with the controls as they plummeted through the cloud layer. We've got company, she shouted. Lots of it. Through the viewport, they watched a full syndicate battle fleet emerge from the clouds. At its center, an enormous command carrier cast a shadow larger than some cities. Director Raven's not holding back this time, Darian said, his tactical enhancements analyzing the fleet's formation. Those ships are carrying enough firepower to level a continent. Lyra joined him at the viewport, their hands finding each other instinctively. Where their skin touched, the silver light glowed brighter. Maybe that's what needs to happen, she said softly. Darian turned to her. What are you thinking? The genetic changes, the evolution, it spreads through proximity and emotional connection. If we could reach enough people at once. You want to broadcast the transformation? Reed called from the cockpit. That's either brilliant or suicidal. Both, probably, Lyra admitted. But if we can reach the carrier's communication array, we could use their own network to spread the change. Not through force or control, but through choice. Another blast rocked the ship. Warning lights flashed across every console. We've got about 10 minutes before they blow us out of the sky, Reed reported. Whatever you're going to do it fast. Darian pulled Lyra close, their foreheads touching. Together? She smiled, the silver light in her eyes matching his. Always. Reed aimed their failing ship directly at the carrier's landing bay. What followed would be remembered as the Battle of the Dawn, though very little actual fighting took place. As syndicate forces surrounded them in the carrier's bay, Lyra and Darian didn't raise weapons. Instead, they simply joined hands and opened themselves fully to the power they shared. The silver light exploded outward, touching soldier after soldier, crew member after crew member. And everywhere it reached, people began to change. Director Raven's voice boomed through the carrier speakers. Kill them. But even her voice faltered as the light reached the bridge. The transformation swept through the carrier like a tidal wave of evolution. Those who fought it found their genetic programming dissolving. Those who embraced it found themselves becoming something new, something free. When the silver light finally faded, the carrier had become a beacon, broadcasting the change across the planet below. Not through force, but through possibility. Through hope. The war wasn't over, some would always resist change, would always choose control over freedom. But the first true step toward humanity's next evolution had been taken. And it had begun with love. 1 year after the Battle of the Dawn, Lyra stood on the observation deck of the transformed syndicate carrier, now known as Haven Station. Below, New Aurora City gleamed with a different kind of light. The old neon had been replaced by the subtle silver glow of evolved humanity. Still watching the sunrise? Darian's arms slipped around her waist, their shared genetic resonance humming between them like music. Hard to believe it used to look so different, she said, leaning back against him. Sometimes I wonder if we did the right thing. Having doubts. Not doubts. Just awareness of the responsibility. She turned in his arms, studying the familiar planes of his face. The scar remained, but it now shimmered with the same silver light that marked all the changed. We gave humanity a choice, but choices have consequences. Speaking of consequences. Darian nodded toward the door where Reed entered, followed by a group of children. Their silver-lit eyes marked them as the first generation born to changed parents. "Teacher Lyra," they called excitedly. "Will you show us the story again?" Lyra smiled, extending her hand. A hologram formed above her palm, showing the double helix of human DNA intertwined with strands of light. "Which story would you like today?" "The one about love changing everything," a small girl said. "About how you and Teacher Darian made evolution kind instead of scary." "Evolution was always kind," Darian said, kneeling beside the children. "We just helped people remember that." Reed laughed. "Kind might be stretching it. The outer colonies are still resistant. Some call it genetic terrorism." "They're afraid," Lyra said, closing the hologram. "Change is never easy, especially change you didn't choose yourself." A alert chimed softly through the station. Reed checked her communicator and frowned. "Speaking of the outer colonies. We're receiving a transmission from Europa base. They're reporting some kind of new mutation in their changed population." Darian's tactical instincts immediately engaged. "Hostile. Unknown. But it's different from anything we've seen before. The silver light, it's starting to show new colors." Lyra felt a familiar excitement stir in her scientist's heart. "It's happening again. Evolution doesn't stop, it just changes direction." "Should we be worried?" Reed asked. Lyra and Darian shared a look, their genetic bond singing with shared purpose. "No," they said together. "Then what should we do?" Lyra took Darian's hand, their combined light creating patterns of impossible beauty in the air around them. The children gasped in delight, reaching out to touch the swirling colors. "We do what we've always done," Lyra said. "We face it together. We learn. We grow. We evolve. And we love," Darian added softly. The children began to glow with their own unique patterns, the next step in humanity's journey already writing itself in their genes. Outside the station's windows, the sun rose over a changed earth, its light mixing with the silver glow of evolution. In the end, it hadn't been weapons or control or fear that transformed humanity. It had been the simplest, most complex force in existence, the power of two hearts choosing each other, choosing hope, choosing love. And somewhere in the vast database of Haven Station, a final log entry from Project Nexus remained, written in Lyra's hand. The experiment was a success, but not in the way anyone expected. We didn't create super soldiers or controlled evolution. Instead, we discovered that the greatest power in the universe isn't the ability to change DNA. It's the ability to change hearts. The rest, as it turns out, follows naturally. End log. Begin everything else. As Lyra and Darian stood among the children of their transformed world, watching new colors swirl through the familiar silver light, they knew that this wasn't really an ending at all. It was, as it had always been, just another beautiful beginning.